Hi guys, it's me again. Today we're not going to do any coding. What we're going to be doing is I had a question about how I create dynamic side characters and keep them involved in the story. I'm not really sure that I'm the best at doing this, but I'm going to try to tell you what I do anyway. So grab your coffees. You know I always have mine. And just sit back and listen. You don't need your computers. You can take notes if you want, but I don't know how helpful it's going to be. But stay tuned and I'll be right back. Okay, so the best way for me to really explain how this is done is by using my own stories because it's easier for me to relate. If you haven't read my stories, that's totally fine. You don't have to. I'm just going to use it as an example and I'll explain why. My first tip about creating dynamic side characters is to make them diverse. I have read so many stories on the episode platform that have very minor amounts of diversity. I get it if you don't want to write about people that are different from you because you don't understand. That's fine. It is, it is hard to write about someone that you're not. I'm a white girl that grew up in Maine. I didn't grow up in the most diverse place in the world. But, I'm also old. I live in London now. I've lived in Italy. I've traveled so much. So I have these experiences that are really helpful in me creating these dynamic characters. But it's not impossible to create dynamic characters, even if you don't know anyone that's anything other than what you are. It's easy to research. Oh my God, you have the entire internet at your fingertips all the time, on your phone, on your computer, on a tablet. Oh my God, you can get it anywhere. You can watch TV and movies and see how characters interact with each other. It's really, really easy to find examples of diversity, and it's easy to do research on it. So, just look online. I'm not saying look at Wikipedia. Wikipedia is not always good. But do real research about culture and different places. If you write about somebody who's living in New York, research New York. If you have someone that's living in London, do research on London. Don't just do what you see in the movies. Actually put in a little bit of effort and try to do that. If you want to write about your hometown, write about your hometown. Great, you already know a lot about that. But make sure that you have these interactions with different characters and cultures and religions and races, and you don't have to, shout it from a rooftop. You don't have to. This is another thing that is one of my pet peeves in Episode, so sorry. Episode is a visual platform. You can show things without actually having to say it. A lot of people, what they do, and it's, not the worst thing, but they'll kind of say, this is Charlie. He's Jewish. He does this. It's like, okay, you could have showed us that he was Jewish in a different way. Visually, one, there are people that make overlays that are super helpful, different various cultural overlays, outfits people wear, you can use that. There are so many ways you can show diversity in your story without actually saying, my story's diverse. It's like you can actually show that. That's the whole point of Episode, is being able to show rather than just tell. In a novel, you have to tell, you have to describe. In Episode, you can describe, but the whole point of the visual aspect is that you can actually physically show what you're doing. And that makes it, so much easier to add in this diversity without having to actually say it out loud. So that was my little tangent there. The other thing that I do to create dynamism between my characters in the story is, a lot of people do these worksheets with personality tests and astrological signs and I don't know, activities they do, what they do for work, all that kind of stuff. I'm not big into astrology or personality tests. I find them interesting, but I don't find them very useful otherwise. For me personally, other people can use it, it's fine. My most important thing to how to create these side characters that revolve around the main story is, what relationship do they have to the main character, or the main characters if you have like a couple. So this is where I'm going to use an example. I've done this with a couple of stories, but I'm going to use a recent example, which is in Just Push Play. So in this story, you have your main character, who's Saul, she's 36 years old. She has twin 16-year-old kids. They sign her up for this video dating service. It's set in the 80s, so no, Tinder or whatever. And so she's looking for a relationship with somebody, anybody. She's bisexual, so it can be a man or woman. So what I've done to create this diversity within the cast, one, my characters, everyone she's dating, there are 4 love interests in the story. Everyone that she could date is a different race, for starters. Saul herself is of Mexican descent. She's Mexican American. And I'd try to work a bit of, she doesn't really speak Spanish in the story, mostly because my Spanish is shaky. I haven't used it in a long time. But if she does, one thing you can always do is double check with someone. I have someone who I double check. If I write anything in Spanish, I double check with her and say, is this correct? If it's not, she tells me and I change it. It's so easy to do that within the episode community. There is such a diverse base in the community that you'll always be able to find someone to help you. And I don't think I've ever asked someone and they've been like, no thanks, I'm not helping you with that. Everyone wants to be represented appropriately. So it's always worth asking. I mean, if they say no, they say no. Go and look for someone else. You'll find someone that'll help you. Anyway, one of the, so we have 2 side characters, and that are her kids. They're not, they're involved in the story, but I don't make things revolve around them so much. But they're always kind of taken into account because they are a big part of her life. Then you have her, she's a widow. So you have her husband who died, who shows up in flashbacks. You have his sister, who's Tess, who's also her best friend. They were best friends before she ever dated her brother. So they have a certain relationship that goes back. They have this kind of familiar, very close relationship. And then you have all these love interests. So you have Asa, who is a single parent. The reason that Asa meets Saul is because he is the parent of one of her students. So that's how they know each other. So they have that kind of connection in that way. And then you have Ralph, who she meets through this dating service, but who also has this connection to her, which is found out kind of later in the story, that he's actually the uncle of her son's best friend, which makes that connection a little bit more difficult. You have Molly, who she also meets through the dating service. That is their only connection at the moment in the story. So, but that's a solid connection. And they have a kind of a common enemy of sorts, in that they both dated the same person. I mean, Saul only for a second, but in any case, they have this connection through that. And then you also have Stella, who actually runs the bar where she met all these dates. So she'd have this kind of controlled space to meet everybody in. So you have these 4 characters. They all have different backgrounds. They all have different professions. They're different ages. They have different connections to the main character, but they are all connected somehow. even her best friend slash sister-in-law Tess is connected to, she knows Stella as a friend. She also has met Asa before, so she has these, you create these dynamic relationships by connecting the character to each of these other characters. All the characters have different personalities, different sexualities, different, relationships with their parents, different goals in life. I think these things are the things that are most important when creating these side characters, is having these kind of different aspects of them that where they can be similar to the main character in some ways, but you want them to be different in other ways. If you're, kind of like in real life, if you're too similar to someone, you end up butting heads a lot because you're just too much alike. It's better to have some things that are different. Otherwise, it's boring. It just is. My husband and I don't actually have all that much in common. He's very, he's an economist. I'm like a designer. I failed economics in school. He failed art somehow. God knows how. But, we have these things that neither one of us understands each other's jobs basically at all. But, we get along in other ways. Like we have the same sense of humor. We, raise our kids in the same way, that kind of thing. So you have these, you want to be different in some ways and similar in other ways, so that there is that dynamism in the relationship. So it's not just they always agree on everything and they never disagree, and they're, never fight, and, nothing bad ever happens. I mean, that's not real life. Not everything's sunshine and rainbows all the time. You wish it would be. I mean, that would make it easy, but it's not what makes it interesting. So I think that's kind of my most important takeaway, is to have that kind of diversity, not only in, their beliefs or their skin color, but also in, their personalities, in how they relate to the main character. And that's the best way to always keep them involved, and you can always easily pull in these side stories so that everything works together and you have this dynamic story that people want to keep coming back to. I hope this was helpful for you. It was a bit of a rambling rant for me, but if you have any questions, you're always welcome to leave a message in the comments below. If you like this video, hit the like button. It'd also be great if you subscribe so you can get updates on when new videos come out. I try to have one out every week. And thank you so much for listening to me rant, and hopefully I'll see you next time.